So today we're going to play around with is we're going to use CockroachDB in the guise of a Spring Data JDBC application. Now I know all the time we're talking about JPA. It's a hot one. A lot of people are using it. You can go far and wide across the internet and find everybody's using it, but not as many people have heard about Spring Data JDBC. And so I wanted to share some of the love that we have there. So I'm going to pivot over here where we can see a little setup here. We're going to build from scratch. I like diving head in deep there. And I'm using IntelliJ IDEA. You can use whatever IDE you want to use, but I'm going to put we're going to put a little app together and build up something. And what's a more fun app to build than something to manage your payroll system? I mean, come on. Doesn't everybody just love doing that kind of stuff? Isn't that fantastic? This is going to be a Java app that we're building. We're going to use Java 17, and IntelliJ IDEA has this nice little GUI box in it. I don't know, VS Code may have it too. I'm a neophyte for VS Code, but I've just given it a name to use the start.spring.io stuff. I'm going to use Java and Maven. So, if you were building this, you can use your favorite tool. I'm an old guy and I like doing Maven stuff. And I'm going to use Java 17. Now, if I'm going to hop to it, some of the stuff that I want to grab, I'm grabbing the latest stable version of Spring Boot here, which right now is at 3.4.1. If you live on the edge, go grab snapshots if you're really up for it. I'm not going to do that today, and I'm just going to pencil in here JDBC. And so I'm actually going to grab the second one here, Spring Data JDBC. And something else I want to get here is Postgres. The big part of the secret sauce of CockroachDB is that no special driver required. Just grab a Postgres driver and you're good. We can get all that, and then we'll build a thin lightweight RESTful API on top of it. So I'm just going to grab Spring Web. And you know what? That's it. Now here's what's fun when I use this. The thing bops around with different windows, so I have to wait till it makes a new window, and then I can share that one. Let me reshare. And let's see if I got that one. All right. Oops. So now we're operational here. Well, not fully operational. We have the bare bones of an app. So if you're not familiar, start.spring.io is from Broadcom, from the Spring team, and you can basically go to their website. You can pick all these cool options. What modules do you want? AMQP, JDBC, Redis, whatever, any kind of module, and it kind of pulls together a starter project, and then it downloads it as a zip ball. And so then you can unpack it and start playing around with it. And that's sort of what we just did. It's just IntelliJ has this nice shortcut to do it inside the IDE all for you. And if I open up the build file, I've got some pop-ups here I need to clear off. We can see it's put in exactly what we picked. We have Spring Data JDBC. This is the starter that gives you access to Spring MVC for building web stuff. And we also got a Postgres driver all geared up here. Let's see, I didn't mean to hit that one. I'm just gonna adjust it here a little. Okay. Now what it does here is this, I'll just show you what's currently in our nice little empty project. So we have this public static void main based on the information I put into that check-in box, it just made up the name of the application right here. And then it put a Spring Boot application annotation on the project, and then this is the little runner you use to invoke it. And from here, Spring Boot will just start up the app, and it will scan and look for information about the project and make decisions about what to activate. And it'll also look at class path settings, like what our build file does, to figure out exactly how much it needs to auto-configure on our behalf. And right now, we really don't have much at all. All we have, another nugget is you can actually set property-based stuff down here in the source main resources application.properties file. And it's picked an application name for us, and that's about all it's done. So what we're going to be doing here is looking at how to build this out a little bit deeper. Now, one thing I'm going to put up here is I'm going to pull up here a terminal, and I want to let you know I happen to be running a copy of Cockroach locally here. Oops. Let me type that. So I'm running an instance, and this is this is what's called the single node configuration. So this is not a production grade version. In a production grade cluster, you'd be running at least 3 nodes for the availability, for the not just for consistency, but also availability and for being able to survive outages and stuff. But this is a developer's environment here. So I'm just running a single node, no security, basically the most bare bones thing to test run with. And the first thing I want to do is I need to make sure I have a database ready that my application can hook into. So what I'm going to do is I mistyped that. So I'm going to go into the shell here. And I actually have multiple databases inside this database management system that I'm running here for different things. And in this case, I already have an instance of this payroll database created. Now, if you were to grab our code and go run it yourself, you have to go create this database outside the application so it's ready and awaiting. So in that case, I've already got the database. In fact, I can set database equal to payroll, and then we can come back to this to play around with it. So one of the things that's if you've done Spring Boot applications before, if you've worked with Spring and Java technology, you may be used to the servlet containers default port being port 8080. Well, in CockroachDB, that port's already taken. Port 8080 is used by DB Console, which is our system management tool that you can go and get insight to. I'm not going to pull it up right now, but I could go right now to localhost 8080 in a browser. It'll serve me up the admin interface. So for the app, I need to pick something else. I'm going to change the server port to port 8000 so that when this app starts up, it'll pick an available port. And what I need to do is add some JDBC settings here. So I need to configure the data source. Data source is a JDBC object that you define. And here with these property settings, you can set the JDBC URL, which in this first line we can see that it's a JDBC protocol. It's a Postgres protocol, so that tells JDBC how to communicate with the driver properly. And it happens to be on localhost, and this is the default port that CockroachDB runs on. This is the name of the database that I want my application to connect to. And for this context, because it's just a demo app, we've got SSL mode disabled. And then in the default, if you just download CockroachDB using Homebrew or whatever, it defaults to having a username of root with no password. Do not run it this way in production in any way. Now, there's some other stuff I'm going to copy and paste in from my show notes here. And these are some connection pool settings. So you can go check CockroachDB's online docs for recommendations on connection pooling, but we have some basically recommendations on how to tune your cluster and set it. So this is what I have for demoing purposes. And then the last thing I want to add in is I want to set some log levels because I like to dial up what I call the nerd knobs to see what's happening, to crank it out and make sure things are happening right. Now, another thing I forgot to put in is Spring Boot has this other configuration decision that it makes. It's trying to figure out, is this production or are you in some kind of demo mode? If it spots you using the in-memory database of like H2 or HSQLDB, whatever, if it spots those embedded databases, it flips to its demo mode situation, which by definition, it will run SQL initialization scripts. But if it spots just a standard Postgres or some other standard driver like that, it's going to not do that. That's the stuff that says, do you run the script that drops tables and recreates them on the fly? So because we're just using a Postgres driver, it's going to not drop any tables. And I want it to drop and create the tables every time I restart the app. So I'm putting this parameter in here called SQL init mode always. Now with this, I'm very close to getting something set up here. And here's where let's pause and chat a little bit here because some of the viewers maybe you've tinkered with Spring Data JPA in the past, and this is your first foray into using Spring Data JDBC. Felipe, I don't know how much you've I'm sure you've touched JPA more than once.
Yes, yes. For our viewers, it's like remember, Spring has this amazing ecosystem on part of the data, and of course, the main modules on Spring Data is Spring Data Commons, Spring Data JDBC, R2DBC, JPA, Key Value, LDAP, you name it. And right now, Greg is practically using the Spring Data JDBC. It's a little different if you choose when we go to the SpringStart.io. You should see something like JDBC. If you see JDBC, normally you're gonna see a Spring Data JDBC and just a Spring JDBC. And right now, Greg is just using Data JDBC. This is a whole ecosystem based on repositories, and probably Greg is gonna talk about it. But yeah, I've been doing not only JPA but also JDBC. So practically this technology is amazing. And plus, if you add this engine, CockroachDB, this is even amazing, right? So
Yep, yep. One of the features you get with Spring Data JPA or with JPA is it's possible to sit there and say, here's I've defined all these entity types, I've laid out all the annotations. JPA, go create all the tables for me, and it will do that.
yes,
We don't do that with Spring Data JDBC. Instead, we need to supply our own data definition, and that's not because we're like mean or vicious or anything, but instead it's actually kind of what the community prefers. If you're more the bent of I don't need help with, I don't need you to do all this stuff for me. Instead, I like to take on some of the responsibility myself. I've already got the SQL scripts that define the tables, that create, that set everything up. I can handle that. I'm cool. We're all adults here. So that's that's the deal. So I need to supply the definition here of our schema. So let's go back to it. Oop, let me see. That's not the. I want this one there. That's a little easier to read. I'm like, no way can you read that. So what I'm going to do is create. I'll go up here and let's see. No, that's wrong. Okay, let's make a new file. Let's call it. We're going to call it. When I get pop-ups on the thing, you can't see them through the streaming stuff. But I prompted it for that, and I'm going to create an employee table. So, all right. So, when you have this init mode flipped to where it's going to do where you're asking Spring Boot to do the initialization, one of the things it does is it runs this schema.sql file for you, which says set up the schema. It looks for the file name schema.sql. You can put more qualifiers, like if you use different, you can have different configure or different what's the property name. You can sit there and say this is production or this is test or this is staging, and you can do schema-test.sql if you're going to run it with for a specific sub environment. But by default, it's also going to run schema.sql unconditionally. And so in this case, we're just going to do drop table if exists, now create table. In this case, real simple table. We're going to have a primary key ID. In this case, we're going to use UUID. We're not using a sequence counter because when we get into distributed SQL and distributed databases, UUIDs is the preference. We're also going to have what's the person's name. And in this case, real simple. We'll just have a single name attribute versus first name, last name, username, whatever. We're just going for a simple demo. And then this person's going to have some kind of role in our delicious company here. And so I got all this set up. And if I actually go back here and just run the app, we can see what happens. Let's pull this up. So we're running everybody's favorite ASCII art here for Spring, running version 3.4.1. Yeah, active profile. That is the phrase I was looking for, the active profile, whatever. So it's running in default profile. We told it to run on Tomcat, to run on port 8000. And then down here, we can see it's saying it's executing the script file, the schema, and we can see that it's actually carried out these two statements here, the drop table, create table. And so I should be able to just hop over to the terminal here and select star from employee. And sure enough, I can see it right here. I got an ID, a name, a role, and 0 rows because it just dropped it and created the table. So there's no data in there right now. So we've kind of got the fixins here to actually start hanging some stuff off of this. And so something I like to do is first I want to define the entity types. So let's go create an employee object. Now, if you'll notice here, so I've defined a class, an employee type that I want to map. I want to map one of these objects. It's going to map onto a row of the data over there. And you'll notice this is the package that the table annotation is found inside. This is Spring Data JDBC is part of a slightly bigger project called Spring Relational or Spring Data Relational. It actually services both JDBC and the reactive variant called R2DBC. So you can use the same annotations for either one. Now we just saw the types. We had an ID, so I'm going to capture an ID field. Let's get a name, and let's get a role. So these are 3 fields, or at least the 3 fields we're interested in when we're talking to this table, which in this case is all of them. So the thing is, I need to tell Spring Data JDBC where the primary key is. So I use an @ID annotation. Now this is actually comes from Spring Data Commons. This is an annotation that's used across the entire portfolio of Spring Data projects, and it's different. Again, if you're visiting and you're used to doing JPA, there's a different ID annotation you use if you're doing a JPA based application. This one is Spring specific. And then I need to add something else. There's something that JPA has that JDBC does not have, at least out of the gate. Let's see here. So JPA has this like cache mechanism. Whenever I do a query with JPA, the results come back and get stored in the entity manager as a cache set, and that cache is actually managed by the entity provider. And so every time you're doing updates or fetching, it's making the decision as to when it needs to flush the updates all the way out to the database or when it needs to pull something. And in some scenarios that's beneficial, and in other scenarios it actually can get in your way, and you're having to either tell it go force the changes out to the database, or you're telling it to evict the cache altogether and go all the way out to the database and fetch. And Spring Data JDBC, this is another one of the things of let's just take that out of the way and let you decide when you need to do that. And one of the things that the JPA is doing is deciding, I've just created this object. Is it a new object? Is this an insert that it needs to happen, or is it an update that needs to happen? So that is, we don't, instead of the magic of JPA happening, instead, we're going to create a Boolean attribute is new, and we're going to define it in our application. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to call it private Boolean is new. And I'm going to add one thing to it to signal that this is actually not part of the entity. The is new column, it doesn't go out to the database. It's nothing that needs to be mapped back and forth. So I'm going to put a transient annotation on it. So this is 100% managed inside the application. Now we get to, let's start building stuff up here. And so I'm going to start by creating a constructor call. Well, let me see. We create an instructor, constructor, I keep saying that. Okay, so let's use the magical IDE's constructor creator. Okay. I think I was... Now it did that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. So I'm going to create a constructor where if you give me the ID, the name, and the role, I'll put them in here, and I'm going to say that in that situation, if that's all that you're giving me, I'm going to flag this as new. So it's a signal you need to do an insert on this. Now there's one other constructor I'm going to, well, not, Another constructor I'm going to build is a bare empty one. And that's where I'm just going to null everything out. So that way, if you just need to create a new one, you get an empty object. And then I'm gonna add another one. So this is where if you've got the ID on hand, if the application somewhere up in the business logic generated the key for it, you can supply it here. But I want another scenario where nobody's created an ID yet. I don't have a primary key. All I have is the data, the real, the data that we're dealing with. And so again, I'm going to call a constructor up above, but this time I'm going to invoke the uuid.randomID function. And so I'm going to do that. So this lets me define, so business object here, where I'm just going to add the name, the person's name and the role, and I'm going to let this thing generate a new primary key right there on the spot. Now what I'm going to do is it doesn't show up because it's a pop-ups, but I'm going to generate the getters and setters for this entire class here using the built-in functionality. And then the last thing is we need some equals, a hash code, and a toString to make this really, a completed Pojo class. Okay, let's see here. I think we're getting close. All right, okay. Now I remember I mentioned about this isNew thing. I'm going to actually strike the isNew column thing from the toString. I also want to. I'm going to redo this. I've got show notes here that are coaching me along, and the other thing is I want the isNew to not be part of the equals and hash code stuff. So I'm going to regenerate those and not include the isNew. Okay. So maybe it's looking like, gee, we spent a lot of time defining the entity object or something. It's like, I don't know, that's tedious. Yes, it is. It's always kind of like that, but that's something we need to make sure we're doing correctly, because this is we're really mapping the Java object onto what's going into the database. So it makes sense to spend a little time to get that right. Make sure we have the right annotations set, because if you don't do it right, you're going to come back and have to rip up a lot of track and start over in some cases. But what I'm going to do next here is I want us to get to operational. So I'm going to add a repository. Felipe made slight reference to it earlier, but this is sort of where now we get to start defining the operations we get to do from a resource perspective. So if you didn't know, Spring Data in general operates on this concept. You can define a repository, and it's an interface, meaning you don't have to implement everything. Spring Data can implement a lot of stuff based on what it sees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend what's called the list CRUD repository. It's a already defined repository interface. And after I create it, we'll go look at what's inside it exactly. And it's a generic interface. So you have to define what the domain object is that it operates over. In this case, the employee object we just defined, and what its primary key type is, which in this case, we're using UUIDs. Now, I'm not going to go in this live stream, I'm not going to discuss why UUIDs are superior to monotonic counters that we're maybe used to with traditional monolithic databases, but it's something you can go Google up after the live stream's over. If I open up list CRUD repository, you'll notice we've gone in at the top. You can see we've gone into Spring Data Commons. So this is sort of a pre-baked interface. Now it extends there's a hierarchy of interfaces, and this provides us essentially with some bare operations. We can either do a save operation and get back a list, so we can save an iterable collection of entities. We can find all and get handed back a list. Or we can hand it a list of IDs, in this case, UUIDs, and get back a list of employee objects in this case. when you have spare time, you go look up the hierarchy, but there's more, there's some more operations like find by ID, find, there's also find one, which is an older operation. There's sort of find all and find one, if you think about it. For something in the middle, we have to define that ourselves.
Just want to add, Greg, again, for our viewers, probably you already know about the CRUD repository, just the CRUD repository. And the difference between this is that the CRUD repository on the find all returns an iterable, right? And
That's
in
right.
this case, this is going to be a list. And if you take a look into our documentation or the documentation on the Spring team, there are more, right? Like a paging and sorting repository. Probably that's one of the most used or common use, right, for doing paging. Also, there's the revision repository, right? Like normally provides the methods for accessing historical revisions of your entity. So there are more, right? But in this case, this is one of the cool implementation or the cool signatures that returns a list.
Mm-hmm. It's really handy. And actually, we actually, believe it or not, there's not a single operation inside our employee repository, and yet we've got enough to actually build up a web layer on top of it. So why don't we go do that? So I'm going to try to bake as simple of a web controller as I can pull off here. So I'm going to create API controller. Let me rename that. This is proof this is a live demo. Okay, we're going to use a little bit of Spring MVC to do this. And so in this case, I'm just making an API controller. I don't want to get into templating or any of that stuff. So I'm going to make what's called a REST controller. In this context, it's instead of getting handed back a template that the template engine renders, instead, I'm going to hand back an object. And also it's on the class path with Spring MVC when you in a Spring Boot app is Jackson, the JSON serialization deserialization library. So Jackson will kick in and serialize the object into JSON for us. Now for this controller to do its magic, it needs a copy of the repository. So I'm going to do that, and it's flagging me saying, where did you get that from? And I said, I want to use constructor injection to create that thing. And this when you start up the app, part of what Spring Boot does when you have Spring MVC on the class path, it looks around for every class that's got one of these annotations on it and says, oh, that's a web service. Let's register that properly with the dispatcher servlet. And then it's going to look at the constructor call and say, hey, you need one of these guys. Okay, let's see if we can find that in the app context. And it tells it, okay, you need to go create this first before you create this. And it's not magical. It's just a very nice, consistent, easy way to get up and running without you having to do it by hand. Let's define some routes here. Let's create a find all. And how about we return a list? Let's get list onto the imports. Okay. So I'm gonna, now I notice, well, it doesn't show up in the pop-ups. I have the code completion, but I can go find the repository.findAll method. Remember, I didn't create that. That was, as Felipe was saying, it's in one of those higher up interfaces. In that case, this one actually is in the list CRUD repository that we directly extended because it returns back a list. Whereas it used to be we didn't always have that one and you used CRUD repository, which instead would return back an iterable. So I can do that, but what I need to do is I need to map this method onto a route. So I'm going to call it API employees in standard REST parlance. And believe it or not, I've got a working app here. And I'm going to prove it, but I'm going to restart the app that's actually been running the whole time. It's going to restart. We're going to see that it reran the scripts and stuff and should be up and running. So what I'm going to do is hop over here. Now, this terminal tab is hooked into the database. Again, I can see, is there anything special in that employee table? Nope, 0 rows. I'm going to open another terminal. So this makes it easy. I found this terminal is really handy when doing live streaming, because whereas I use the terminal app, I would have to stop the share, start the share, all that kind of stuff. It's easier to just do it all inside this nice integrated development environment. So I'm going to curl. If you remember, we ran it on port 8000. And I can see right here, here's the route that I need to get to. So let's go to API/employees and let's see what we can find. Well, we got something. We got all this. This is sort of our HTTP information. We can see the headers and stuff like that. And this is the response header. And basically way down here is an empty list. Now I'm going to repeat the thing, but I also often use the JQ command line tool to put a little bit of nice polishing on the formatting. So essentially we got handed back an empty list. And why not? The row's empty, right? So there's no data there. So for a demo, I like to create some demo data. So I'm going to go create a database loader. So I'm going to, you can kind of do this, and there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I've just created a whole new class. I've called it database loader. It doesn't really matter what you call it. And for a demo, it's okay to put it in the code. For a real production system, if you're loading data, you may want to have some kind of SQL script to handle that. But I'm going to annotate it with configuration. So again, this is one of the annotations that will signal to Spring Boot, hey, on startup, you need to go scan this class. There could be, when you say configuration, it means there could be bean definitions for the application in here. So what I'm going to do is create what's called a command line runner. Now, what's command line runner? This is a Spring Boot class, or I should say it's a Spring Boot interface. And in this case, it's a functional interface. That means it has a single method. It's a SAM, a single application method, I think is what that means. And essentially, it's called run. You can feed it however many arguments you want, but essentially, after Spring Boot is up and running, has gotten the signal that the app is up, it goes and finds every command line runner in the app context and it runs them in no guaranteed order. So what I'm saying is when the app is up, I want Spring Boot to run the code that's inside this init database operation automatically. Now, command line runner is a SAM, like I mentioned, so what I need to do is return back, I need to give it one. So what this is a Java 8 Lambda function, and it's one input argument, which is a variable list string, and one block of code it can operate on. And Java will bend this into a command line runner that is invocable. Now the idea is I would like to go create some data, so why not use the same repository that I've been using to fetch data? And in that case, I need to inject it so I can actually get my hands on it. So what I can do is now I can go invoke the save command, and I can create my new employee. And who's my first employee that I've just hired? None other than Frodo Baggins. We'll hire a few other people for our little startup here. I mean, if you're gonna have Frodo, you got to have Bilbo. What was his job? He was a burglar. And anywhere that Frodo goes, you have to, of course, have Samwise Gamgee. I mean, Frodo can't get out of there without Sam. So here's our thing. We're going to create these three. Now, you may have spotted, we talked about the list repository, or maybe you noticed there's a save all where you could feed it a list. It's possible to use some of the newer Java list operators. We could have created a list with all three of these employees and fed them into a single save all statement. That would have worked, but I just opted to use this one. But the one nugget I mentioned when using this configuration class is it looks for bean definitions. This is not yet a bean definition. Instead, what I need to add is the @bean annotation. This is the signal to do that. So now if I go back to the run tab where everything's running and I restart it, all right, clears it out, launches it, and it's giving me we've got an error. Let's see if we can figure out what's happening. Okay, it ran our little script here. That's good. What do we got here? Okay. Executing prepared SQL statement. It's doing an update and not an insert. So I've gotten something wrong because it should have been doing an insert when it didn't exist. So it basically failed when it tried to run. Who is it? Does it tell me who it was trying to run? Sometimes it'll show me, depending on okay, it's trying to, this is the first row. It's trying to load Frodo Baggins. So what I need to do is go back and check the rules on the is new stuff. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay, I see in my show notes I didn't do this. Okay, so let me see. Well, is that let's see, is that the case?
We need to add the persistable implementing the class, or
oh yes, that's it. Bingo. This shows me my runtime on Spring Data JDBC is a little thin, so that is a good one there. So let's go look, what is persistable? It's got the primary key type, and its fundamental job is to serve up this get ID operation, and that could be null, but it also comes with the is new functional definition. And so Spring Data JDBC leans heavily on that. Good call. Okay, let's try again. All right. All right. Ka-ching. Okay. So here we can see, here's one insert operation with Frodo Baggins. You see we've got our UUID that was generated. We got Bilbo Baggins, and then finally, here's Samwise Gamgee. And if I go over to the terminal, we can go back to the SQL shell, and let's see what's here. Select star from employee. So now I can see the 3 entries that we just had the thing create for us through the application. So now they're persisted in the database. Let's run that curl operation against API employees. Let me pull this up here so we can see a little bit more. And so now I can see here I've got a list or a JSON array, and it's got 1 entry for each person.
Quick tip: if you add after the V, the S in the curl, so curl minus VS, you get rid of the silent part, right? So yeah, now it's cleaner,
okay.
right?
I did not know that one. I always use V because I end up needing everything. I don't know. A lot of people like HTTP Pi, whatever. I don't know. I couldn't get into that, but use your favorite CLI tool for talking to REST services. Now, what is this JQ doing over here? It's like a JSON query or something is what it is. And instead you get this. This is the actual format. It's a compactified JSON document sent over the wire. So that's cool. So we can see stuff here. So we've kind of gotten, we're getting underway. We're building stuff. Let's look at some more operations. First of all, in any database system, do you want to select star and just pull back the whole table and serve it up to the screen? Probably not, right? So especially if you're in a distributed database, select star is very bad in a distributed database where you're looking at a table with 100 million rows. You don't want to fetch all that into your web layer. So typically we need to do queries and stuff. And a common thing in this case, say we need to find a particular employee and we need a person of a certain skill set, like a certain role. So let's go create what's called a custom finder. Let's type this correctly. And so what we're doing is I'm creating a new find by, and then the name of this thing here, this text here, is the same name as the property in the entity type. Let me pull this up. I'm going to do this so we can look at both at the same time. So find by role. You can kind of do whatever, any property, find by name, find by role, find by whatever attribute you have. It's also possible to navigate through relationships this way, but we're not going to delve into the more complex stuff. So I'm just going to do find by role. And what I want to do is to play with it, I want to link this method. And this is all that I need to write in this method to define it. And for simple stuff like this, Spring Data JDBC will write the query for me based on this. I just want to hook it into my API layer so I can use it. So for that, we're going to define another operation. We'll call it find by role. Let's see. Now I'm going to go ahead and define the route. Let's see, let's call it API employees role. And then I'm going to put what this is called, this is a parameter, the curly braces. And I'm going to stick in the this path variable annotation. So that this is the signal that tells Spring MVC, look in this route and look for this token. Now you can, it can be something like it can be other stuff. There's ways to override this. It could be the role, and you can sit there and say the role, to map it. But to me, it's just simpler to use the same name. So this takes, essentially all this does is gets Spring MVC to map this thing onto this. Let me cut this out. To map it onto here when a web request comes in. So at this point, I can sit there and say, okay, I'm going to return repository, and then now I have that find by role method that I just defined, and I can just feed it the argument. Now, something else to mention here, or a couple things to mention, is that under the hood, all Spring Data JDBC is using is JDBC template. Well, and I think it's using named JDB or named parameter JDBC template, which is the more sophisticated one. And so it's parsing the methods, it's kind of constructing SQL on your behalf, and it just fires it to JDBC template, which is a utility class that just sits on top of pure JDBC. That's why it's called Spring Data JDBC. And one of the benefits you get is SQL and protection from SQL injection attacks. If you've ever, it uses binding arguments, which is what everybody should be using, but JDBC doesn't force you to do that. You've got the option to bind arguments, but you could just glue it all together in a string and feed it in and it would work. And that would be a big no-no because you can get SQL injection attacks, sneaking stuff in, especially coming in from the user layer. So I just want to point out that Spring Data JDBC does the right thing and protects you when it creates these things. Now with this method, I'm going to scroll down here. I can keep it on display. I'm going to restart the app, and then we're going to test that one out. Okay. If I go back to the terminal, I can run the same operation, and I'm going to see sort of almost the same data. If I scroll back and squint, you're going to notice the primary keys have changed because we dropped the table, we recreated the table, we recreated new UUIDs. It's per se new data. Let's use that extra S argument. So I'm going to go curl localhost 8000. Let's see, API employees role, and let's look for we need a gardener for this task, and I'm going to pipe it through JQ. So in this case, we get a list with one entry. So we can see we got somebody that matches that. If I go back to the run tab with all the log levels we've dialed up, we can see way at the bottom here what happened. It wrote this select operation for us. Select employee.id as ID, employee.role is role, employee.name is name, from employee, where employee.role equals argument. And then here's the binding it did for us with the value. Now it's way at the bottom, so it would be hard to spot. But it sort of did all that for us, which is really, really handy dandy. And, I can again go over here. I can query, I can see it's fundamentally the same 3 rows because like I said, we rebuilt it, but it has different UUIDs. But here's, we've been able to create a custom operation that we didn't have to write ourselves. This is what I call, some of the simplest stuff is, well, maybe I just need to select everything out of a table, or I've got a simple criteria. You can have multiple criteria. You can say find by role and name if you wanted to, and just add 2 arguments. And it'll map them on there, and it'll do an and clause with them in the where clause, or, find by role or name. And it'll do an or clause, stuff like this. So it makes it easy to write the simplest stuff, but typically you start running into scenarios where, I need to write something that's a little more complex than that. So let me undo this one and show an example. Maybe what we can do, talk about some of the more golden features that we have with CockroachDB is there's this other kind of query you can write. One of the things that CockroachDB has, and actually all the modern day databases have this thing called MVCC, or multi-version concurrency control. Now that's a bit of a mouthful, but what it does is it goes to the point of when you're making an update to a row in a table, and CockroachDB, along with many other databases out there, you're not updating that row in place. You're not going to that row of data and updating it right there. That's not what it actually does under the hood, because in order to do that, you would have to lock the row. So you would bar people from reading it while the update is in progress, and that impacts concurrency. So MVCC says, well, instead of doing that, let's create a new row with a version, use a versioning mechanism to do it. So like right now, version 1 is in the table. I'm going to create version 2. And when the commit happens, it flips it. It moves the pointer up to the new row. That way you don't have to do any locks to do that until, the commit's the point when it cuts over to it. What CockroachDB does is, well, you moved from version 1 to version 2. What happened to version 1? It's still there. By default, CockroachDB will hold on to the last 4 hours of data like that. Any kinds of updates, inserts, it kind of has this sort of trailing window of sliding window of 4 hours. Now you can go in and adjust that. We actually know some customers that have set that to 24 hours. You have to have the disk capacity to do that. Now, what can we do with that? There's a type of select statement you can say, which is, well, I want to do that select star and I want to look for something, but I want to look for the way this database was 60 seconds ago, or 5 minutes ago, or 2 hours ago. So we've got a name for that. There's actually multiple names. Now, what I just described was, it's like you're going back in time and saying, I want to look at the state of the database 10 minutes ago. And so some people call it a time travel query. So what you do is you say select star from employee as of system time minus 60 seconds. So it's like you're traveling back in time. The other sense is it's not the current state of the data. If you want the current state of the data in CockroachDB, all the updates and the changes to the table are coordinated by the leaseholder. So imagine you had 3 replicas running. One of them has to coordinate all the changes, and we call that one the leaseholder. And then it corresponds with the 2 replicas to make sure that they stay consistent. So anytime you need to read the state of the data, by default, you go to the leaseholder, because it has the most current state of the system for a given piece of data. For a given row, it's got a particular leaseholder. You go there to ask for it. But there's a phenomena where, let's imagine I have these 3 replicas. I'm in San Francisco, but the leaseholder that's got the thing is in New York. So I'm in San Francisco, but if I want the current state of the data, I have to make a remote call across the country to New York to get back the answer. Well, what if I'm doing an as of system time query and I'm saying, let me look at something 60 seconds ago? Well, let me back up. We know that the replicas are able to update in right now 4.8 seconds or less. So if you say, give me the current system, the current state of this row 5 seconds ago, at that point, we know that not only does the leaseholder have the update, but the other replicas will be caught up to that state of the system. All replicas will be caught up to that state of the system. So when you make a request like that and say, give me the state of the system 5 seconds ago or more, maybe 60 seconds ago, CockroachDB can say, you don't need to go to the leaseholder in that. We can automatically find a replica that's closer to where you're at. And maybe one of the replicas is actually in your data center. So it can find a local copy of it that has the same thing. We call that stale data in the sense that the data is slightly older than the current state of the enterprise. It's not inconsistent, it's not wrong, it's just a little bit stale. So they call it a stale read. But another concept is you're not having to go to the leaseholder. You can go to one of these others, which is also called a follower. So they also call it a follower read. Fun stuff. We've got like 3 different names for the same kind of query. But imagine you want to write that. You want to go say, well, I want this. It'll be a little more performant if I can find a closer copy. So I'm going to write that. How do I do that with Spring Data JDBC? Well, it turns out it's super simple. So I'm going to go down here and make another operation. So again, I'm going to get a list here of employees. I'm going to find what's called recent employees. And so here's where I'm writing. This is the method we just wrote, find by role, is called a custom finder. Okay, a custom finder in Spring Data means Spring Data is going to come up with basically the where clause, the filtering and stuff. This is a custom query, meaning there is no mapping. Spring Data is not going to see any pattern. And so it's like, well, that one you've got to build yourself, to which I say, no problem. I've got this thing called a query annotation that I can write it myself. And I'm going to use a Java multi-line string to do it. So I'm going to write it myself. Select star from employee as of system time. And I'm going to say -1 minute. And so this is a case where you can see it's showing up red on here because IntelliJ doesn't, I've gone beyond the boundaries of what IntelliJ knows. So I don't know, maybe they'll have an update where IntelliJ knows this, but your IDE oftentimes can recognize SQL statements buried in strings and actually help you do code completion. It's kind of amazing, but in this situation, IntelliJ doesn't know what this is. But this is saying, go give me the state of go get me all the employees in the employee table the way they were a minute ago. Now, if I go over here, I can just do this. I can do the same thing here. Select star from employee as of system time -1M. And it gives me a result. It's also possible to say -60 seconds, or you can also use H for hours. But what if I did something like this, like delete from employee. Oh, no, it's just, sorry, delete employee. Wait a minute. Delete employee where name equals Frodo Baggins. Am I not typing? Let me see here. I'm again proof. Let's see. Again, proof that it's a live demo.
Yeah, delete from the name of the table where, yeah.
Yeah, there. Okay, I know it doesn't let you do, like, it will not let you do delete from employee without a where clause. I think that was the first one, was it fell there. So if I do this, select star from employee now, that's going to tell me okay, so the current state says I'm down to 2 people. So I only have Bilbo and Samwise because Frodo's gone. But what if I did that thing earlier? Let's find it. As of system time -60 seconds. So if I say, give me the state of the table 60 seconds ago, now I can see all 3. And that's really cool where, okay, remember I said the default for Cockroach is 4-hour window. Imagine you're the system administrator. You just went in and deleted an entire table of data. You deleted 10 million rows of data and you didn't realize it. And you walk out of there, you get a coffee, you go talk to your buddy in the break room. Somebody says something and you go, oh, I think I did the wrong thing. I think I deleted the wrong data. Guess what? Did you spend more than 4 hours? No. You hustle back to the ops center. You get on there and you're like, I can find the state of the data from an hour ago. Select star from employee as of system time -1 hour. I can recover from that. Handy dandy. And there's a lot of other use cases that flow out of being able to do this. But the point is we want to be able to, oh, now the 60 seconds has passed. So I should be able to, yeah, if I run the same one, we've now passed the 60-second window for that one. So basically I've grabbed a version of that and I've hooked it to a custom thing. Let's go make a web method for that. Let's just call that recent. We don't need a parameter. Or you can start dreaming up, well, can I parameterize that? And yes, you could. So if I do that, I can go over here. I can restart the app. So it's going to drop the employee table. It's going to create the table fresh, reload, start us off with a nice fresh slate of employees. Oops, so if I look at it, I've got all three. Let's look at that new route, employees/recent. Oh, it's looking, I was wondering if you, so one of the things I couldn't remember is, does drop tables survive? If you do a drop table, create table, does that survive through it? And the answer is yes, because we're looking at it right now. So we may need to wait 60 seconds after I restarted the app to see the net effect. The primary keys should also probably roll. So I'm going to sit there and chat for 60 seconds until we get this. If I look over here, I can see the same. See, this is the same data we were looking at before.
Yeah, while we are waiting on that, I can say like another particular keyword that CockroachDB provides is locality. Right, I was kind of playing around, and what Greg explained about, hey, your data. I mean, you're in a distributed system now. You're in a distributed SQL, and now you have a region maybe in LA. Practically, you can do select from employee where your ID and locality is the region US West, for example. That will be part of Cockroach DB feature that allows you to actually query a specific locality. So, yep, these are kind of the cool features that you can find on CockroachDB distributed SQL.
Yep, and by the way, hey everybody that's watching, smash the like button if you want us in the future to do an episode where we deep dive into what Felipe was talking about. It's called multi-region support. Okay, do we need to? We may have to come back to that because that would be a gold mine episode. But we can now see that the here, if you can do the select star here. So this was what we had beforehand was these rows, but now we've got, here's the new state of the system is now we have three. We're back to three. The primary keys have changed. So once again the window that we're looking at is shifted. Now I could look back 30 minutes and see where the system was way back earlier in our live stream. But let's go ahead and delete from employee where name let's get rid of the baggins here. How about that? Select star from employee. So all we have is Samwise left. And if I go over here and run that recent web route, am I not doing it right? Yeah,
because still the data.
Oh, that's right. It's still see, it's a paradigm shift. So you jump to it and you're thinking this is the results, and it's like you have to slide along. So
maybe for the next demo, instead of 1 minute, probably 15 seconds or so.
Yeah, you have to do something like that. So now we've caught up to the state where we deleted 2 people, but and you can, as you're watching this, you can start to imagine, I could parameterize that. What would be good stuff? You start getting ideas. And I've even seen some of our field architects and stuff coaching customers are like, okay, the customers present, I've got this scenario, this transaction where I need to look up this data, and then I'm going to carry out these updates and stuff like that. And there's a whole lot of benefits to doing follower reads. One of the things is, if you look at the state of the system 5 seconds ago, if you're looking at that 5 seconds ago is almost now, it's oftentimes, except in the most highly concurrent, like financial trading systems or something, 5 seconds ago is oftentimes good enough for what people are looking for. But the other thing that is no longer happening 5 seconds ago is there's no more transactions in flight. So typically, if you're needing to update something right now, you need to deal with contention. You need to deal with transactions in flight. You may have to wait. You may have to have retry logic in case you hit retry errors, things like that. If you're able to do a follower read query and look at a replica, you also, the odds you're going to hit a lock is almost non-existent. So no more locks. You've reduced latency because you don't know where the current leaseholder could be. The system is dynamic. The leaseholder could have been in New York. It could have jumped to London if the New York node went down, and you're still like in LA or something like that. So the follower reads let you find something that's closer. And so it's a lot more performance. So sometimes it's like I need a stack of 10,000 IDs to operate against. I could use a follower read to get the list of 10,000, and then now I'm going to do this other operation that is not based on follower reads. So there's a lot of ways to apply this, and we can't delve into all of them right now. I'm trying to see what else is on the list, because this is a lot of good stuff just to kind of get up and get running with. And did I have any other? Oh, this is more or less sort of what we have in the demo, is how to get warmed up on using Spring Data JDBC to work with CockroachDB. In a sense, it's not a lot. There's an element of Cockroach is really cool. It's fun to work with. I'm gonna put up this banner. If you're wanting to take a shot at Cockroach and play around with it, you can actually go to university.cockroachlabs.com. It's free. You just register there, and there's courses in there. So you can start, there's an app developers course. There's kind of an introduction to distributed SQL course. So you can just get familiar, and it's not it's not a lecture. It's a bunch of little short videos. And then it's got this platform that inside the browser, you get to go into a terminal and start playing around with CockroachDB, doing stuff and playing with it and getting familiar with it. And you'll find that it's just another SQL database. If you already know SQL, you can get in there and interact with it and then learn some of its cool features that we've been talking about here. So it's like just another database you can pick up, but it's got all these cool features like we've just been showing today, and you can use it with your favorite technology like Spring Data JDBC. Now I want you to check, this episode started late. We were having some hiccups, and it also we're scheduled to start doing is every other Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We're going to start hosting the Select Star show, and Felipe and I are going to be tag teaming to do that. We're going to be here to share it with you. So in 2 weeks, you can look for it again. So be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss that. Now that doesn't look good. All right, StreamYard. All right. You got any other comments, Felipe?
Well, just kind of the last comment. Remember, I mean, right now we just saw the power of a Spring Data JDBC. And remember, I mean, if you are like, hey, no, Spring is too big and I want to do just JDBC, can I still use CockroachDB? Of course. At the end, it's up to you, right? But just remember, if you're using just plain JDBC, remember that you need to get into your driver manager. You need to deal with the connection. You need to deal with your statement, create your statement, prepare your statement, do the whole shebang, right, on that part. And practically, as Greg said at some point, you need to deal with SQL injection. You need to deal with those kind of things like a transactions. So practically Spring can handle everything for you. And as you can see, it was very clean. Nothing about sessions, nothing about management on how to do transactions, how to do certain things. Practically Spring Data JDBC allows you to do that with, to show your repositories, right? So that's kind of the primary goal. Keep your code clean, lean, and practically easy to read, right? So that's kind of my final thought. And I know this is the first thing. Probably in the next sessions, not only we're gonna cover Spring. I'm trying to convince Greg, like, hey, let's find out how we can do this with Quarkus or maybe with Micronaut and maybe Vertex, some of those other frameworks that allows you to play around with JDBC, and of course try to get into these kind of scenarios where we can use CockroachDB features, right? So that's what we are going to start doing.
All right, perfect. Put it in the comments, the stack you want us to see. Let us know in the comments, and it just might happen.
This episode is over, but your learning has just begun. Visit CockroachLabs.com to find all kinds of content to expand your knowledge.